everybody. Welcome to the Buckeye Weekly Podcast. I am Tony Gerdeman, here as always with Tom Orr. Tom, how's it going?
Well, Tony, I'm sure you have seen this already. I know you have seen this already. But one of the most popular shorts on our YouTube channel this week at youtube.com/BuckeyeHuddle was our good buddy Kevin Noon eating Burger King on the road because, you know, when you're on the road and you're going to a million different places, sometimes you just grab whatever you grab. There is a long and storied history of Kevin's feelings on Burger King. And I have to say, while it was great to see the video, I was very disappointed we didn't get to experience that in person.
Yeah, that's the FOMO. That's, the fear of missing out right there, big time. Oh, to be in that car, not just while he's eating, but the realization is the best part for me. The realization that it's only Burger King, because there's nothing like that. It's the you come downstairs and you see the presents under the Christmas tree. That's what it is. That's better than actually opening the presents. You just see everything. It's like, oh my gosh, this is so amazing. And that's like, you see Kevin and he just sees Burger King and you're like, oh my gosh, this is so amazing. And then it's like, they were like, open your present, Kevin, open your present, Kevin. And he's begrudgingly eating his chicken sandwich because he will not have a Whopper. There will not be any flame broiling in this house.
I do like the idea of Kevin coming down on Christmas morning, and instead of Santa, it's the guy with the enormous plastic Burger King head coming down the chimney with a big sack full of Whoppers for him. I know we have told this story on this show before. I'm sure we have, but it was 3 years ago at this point. It was kind of not during the big portion of the COVID pandemic, but probably 2021, when everything was still like not quite totally opened up yet. And we stopped at a rest stop on the Pennsylvania Turnpike, and we were going to, I guess we must have been going to Rutgers or something like that that year. And, the sign says, here's the 6 things that this rest area has. And we walk in. I walked in first. You walked in right behind me. Kevin was third. And I walked in and I looked, and, the whatever it was, the Sparrow is closed and the Auntie Anne's Pretzels is closed and, something else is closed. And the only thing that's open is Burger King. And I look and I have this like flash of, oh my gosh. And I turn around and look and I see you have the same flash on your face as you see it just a second later. And then Kevin walks in the door, gets this look on his face like Christmas was canceled, and just turns and walks. And there's, one of those like gas station convenience store kind of things. And it was like, I don't know if he got like the bag of little chocolate donuts or something for his lunch, but he was not going to go to Burger King no matter what. Burger King is not my favorite, but I am an adult. I can eat kind of whatever. It's fine. Like sometimes you don't eat your favorite thing all the time. Not everyone has that opinion among our traveling party, Tony, and that's okay.
Yeah, we saw the Grinch running out of there with a bag of Popeye's spicy chicken sandwiches right before we got there. Poor Kevin didn't get his Popeyes, but, fun on the road, always adventurous. And right now, actually, Kevin and Mark are out on their southern swing. They just recently talked to Naeem Offord, the 5-star Ohio State cornerback commit out of Alabama. So they're down there talking to everybody. I would check out BuckeyeHuddle.com for a bunch of that insight and information that they're putting out there. So, Tom, we are doing some listener questions today. There's not a lot going on around the Ohio State world, so it's always better to they call it crowdsourcing, and it's basically just putting the responsibility on everybody else. Now, when you pay a consultant to do the crowdsourcing, then it's like legitimate. So we didn't pay anybody to do the crowdsourcing. I just asked. And then also some of these are from our all-day chat that we did on Wednesday as well at BuckeyeHuddle.com, which happens, here and there quite frequently. So again, check it out. But Tom, let's get this party started. What say?
All right. So first one from @2007 MLR. Over under 6.5 games before Ryan Day does not have to answer a question about who his starting quarterback is going to be for the next game.
This is interesting because the sixth game is at Oregon. So I think this is an interesting number to put it at. And after that Oregon game, you have a bye week. So like there is a lot of time to, if there's been some struggles, or if you just, whoever that starting quarterback is, they've started the first 5 games and then they go and they struggle at Oregon and they lose that game, then it's like, Ryan, are you sure you want to stick with Will Howard? Are you sure it's not time to finally, Devin Brown, he's been here forever. Why can't you just be loyal to the guy who's being loyal to you? But I think it'll be before then. I'm going to take the under on that. You've got those 3 non-conference games. You've got the road trip to Michigan State. I think you have to have all of that said and done and completely out of the way before anybody even thinks about going to Oregon.
I think that's exactly right. And even if you do get through the Oregon game, that would be 6 games. So you would still be under, because that would be, if you were going to make a change, that would be the time you were going to make the change. Coming off, if you're making a change at that point, you're probably coming off of a loss. Plus you're going into the bye week. It doesn't feel like it's going to happen after that. And I think there's a pretty good chance that this year's quarterback battle gets sorted out on no later a schedule than last year's quarterback battle, where, they kind of came into the season and you had a pretty good sense, yeah, it's going to be Kyle McCord. He's ahead of Devin Brown. And they kind of kept things going a little bit for a few weeks into the season, gave Devin Brown a shot to, show what he could do. And Kyle McCord came out of those, in pretty decent shape, won the game at Notre Dame. And there really was not going into that Notre Dame game, there was not really a question who that starting quarterback was going to be, barring some kind of injury. I am expecting that to be kind of a similar situation this year. I actually talked to Ross Fulton on the episode of the morning show that's going to be dropping on Thursday afternoon, already up on our Huddle board for our Buckeye Huddle members. And I talked to him about why he's very confident that it's going to be Will Howard as the starter. And he's pretty convincing. I think we are all kind of leaning towards it's probably going to be Will Howard. Ross is pretty certain. He's speaking in, not in terms of percentages, but in terms of, yeah, it's going to be him and here's why. So you can get his thoughts on that if you listen to the Friday morning episode of Buckeyes Tomorrow Morning. But yeah, I just don't see this being something that's going to really drag on throughout the season, because unless they're really struggling, and given the talent on the rest of the team, I don't really see this team struggling real seriously. I don't know that you're going to mess with, shuffling quarterbacks in and out when you've got everything else on the team going presumably pretty well.
With this schedule, say they had this schedule last year with Akron, the season opener, Western Michigan, the second game, and then a bye week. If it was as close as it was last year, would it have been outrageous to see Ryan Day do what Jim Harbaugh did in 2022 with Cade McNamara getting the start in game 1 and J.J. McCarthy getting the start in game 2 against the worst team on the schedule, and kind of manipulate the outcome that you want? But you could see that this year, if things are so close, you have 2 games, you can give each guy a start, then you have a week off to basically initialize that starter. And it's like, okay, you are our starting quarterback for the rest of the season. You've got a bye week to get everything, to get everybody behind you, that sort of thing. I'm not expecting it, but I think it's maybe worth a conversation in June for us.
It's probably worth a conversation in June, and a show title is Ryan Day going to take a page out of Jim Harbaugh's playbook for the quarterback battle. I mean, that's too many words, but yeah, I mean, you look at the schedule, and Akron, Western Michigan off week, and then it's not like you've got Oregon coming to town the week after the bye, or Notre Dame. It's Marshall, and then it's at Michigan State, and they're kind of going to be, starting from square one. And then you got Iowa, which is, I mean, you're not necessarily going to score a ton of points against Iowa, but you don't necessarily need to score a ton of points against Iowa. So, they have the ability to kind of finesse it a little bit if they want to. It'll be interesting, because I think if there's any question at all, then maybe they do try to do something like that. But it to me feels very likely that they're going to have a pretty good sense, and you're kind of in don't screw it up mode at that point, where if one guy's ahead, play the guy who's ahead. Don't mess around with it. Don't worry, don't have the concern of creating locker room division if you're starting one guy over the other. I think Michigan had the luxury of doing that last year because basically they played no one until about week 10. Ohio State has a much bigger challenge on deck, week 6 or something like that. So yeah, I think you're going to see a decision during fall camp and they're going to stick with it. And I don't expect a real whole batch of quarterback drama this fall. I don't think, but it's college football, Tony. You never know for sure. Drama and nonsense is always right around the corner.
God willing, and the creek don't rise, we will have a quarterback controversy.
All right, next one from our good buddy at Omar_Austin8. How do we feel about this season's linebackers? Do you foresee a big drop-off? Also, how are you and Tom getting by without the wisdom and guidance of Kevin Noon? The last one, I'll address the second portion first. 404, page not found. Sorry, I don't know what the deal is there. As far as the linebackers, I don't see a big drop-off. I think the linebackers are maybe the biggest question mark on the defense, and you'll get to hear Ross talking about that on Monday's morning show. We'll get there in a little bit. If you want an early peek at that show and Ross's thoughts on that, you can find that on the huddle board at BuckeyeHuddle.com on Friday. We drop those episodes early for our subscribers, so you can sign up to be a member today at BuckeyeHuddle.com. But, the linebackers last year, they were fine. Tommy Eichenberg was a really good linebacker for Ohio State, but he was hurt, especially towards the end of the year. Steele Chambers was fine, but was not, an All-American or anything like that. And Cody Simon played quite a bit last year, and Cody Simon's going to play quite a bit this year. So really, you're swapping in Sonny Styles and C.J. Hicks, really, are the two guys you're swapping in there. And I think from what we saw this spring, especially with Sonny, I think they're going to be in pretty good shape, and there's going to be stuff that Sonny does better than CJ, and there's stuff that CJ does better than Sonny, but they should be able to kind of mix and match those guys and use them situationally, and you're probably going to use 3 linebackers at certain times when you're playing Iowa or Michigan or teams like that. So I don't have any real big concerns with linebacker. It feels like linebacker's the biggest concern on the defense, but that really says more about all of the other spots on the defense where there really aren't any concerns than it does about the linebackers.
Yeah, I think the reason it's a concern is you haven't seen CJ Hicks or Sonny Styles play this position consistently, in Sonny's case at all, and CJ Hicks's case almost at all. And when he has played, there have been some issues, some missed tackles, some overrunning, some things. And the way we hear Jim Knowles and James Laurinaitis talk about CJ Hicks, it's always like there's a yeah, but with it a lot. And it's, he's really good at this particular thing. We need to get him better at this other particular thing. And that other particular thing is essentially playing linebacker, like under control. Whereas Jim Knowles says, CJ is really good when we blitz him and when we give him a direction, basically, and implying that he's less impactful when he's doing the reading and reacting type of thing. Sonny Styles worked with the twos all spring long, learning the position, has played some Sam linebacker, but hasn't necessarily been in the box, inside the box between the tackles before, much before. I expect him to win the job, but I expect all 3 guys to play, and they'll be able to do different things with CJ Hicks. I think they're going to find some sort of a jack role for him if he's excelling at that. That's the key also. He's got to be doing what you're asking him to do. He needs to be doing well. And if he is, then you do it more, and you find more for him to do in that role. With Cody Simon, I don't really have much concern at all with him. I went back and looked at last year using Dan Hope's snap counts from 11 Warriors, and I took the snap counts of the linebackers, their tackles. Tom, I did what I call math. I divided the tackles by the number of snap counts, and Cody Simon had tackles on 15.3% of his snaps. Tommy Eichenberg, 13.5% of his snaps. Is it scientific? No, because Cody Simon may not be on as many passing downs, so there's not going to be any run tackling, in those situations. But it gives you an idea. He's a pretty solid tackler, and he gets involved in the play. And Steel Chambers had his ups and downs, and not even necessarily peaks and valleys, just not a lot of big plays. And if we go back to like when he first started playing linebacker for Ohio State, he was making plays. Never really became something more, something significantly more, in my opinion. And the potential is there at that will linebacker spot for there to be significantly more, some playmaking there. But I still need to see it. That's why it's still a bit of a concern, especially relative to everything else.
Yeah, Steel Chambers did fine last year. He was not remarkable. He was not the greatest Ohio State will linebacker in history. He was fine. He was part of a very, very good defense. But it's, I don't think there's going to be a huge drop off by any means. And depending on how things shake out, you could have an improvement there. I don't know that you're going to have a materially better play at the Mike position than you did last year, but I don't think there's going to be a huge drop off there either. So, if it's kind of the same at the Mike and it's going to be the same or maybe a little better at the will, feels like you're probably set up for a reasonably good season, especially if that's the biggest concern on the defense, just because nothing else is really a huge concern right now outside of like, well, we can talk about safety depth or, who's the depth at the end positions or the nose tackle position. Like that's kind of where you're talking. Like these are real rich people problems where, I've used this before, but hey, the wine fridge on my yacht's a little warm. It's a couple degrees warmer than I'd like. And some of my vintage wines are not quite as chilled as I'd like. Like that, that's kind of the problems that Ohio State has on defense this year. So, I guess that's a problem, but it's not really that much of a problem. Next one from @ol_Pete1926. Do you agree that the Ohio State-Michigan game aside, NBC having the Big Ten at night is a better deal than Fox having the Big Ten at noon? This is a really interesting question. And, there's a whole conversation here about why Big Noon gets the numbers that it does. Because normally primetime is the time that you would think of as the traditional, hey, this is when all the eyeballs are on TV. Fox has kind of counter-programmed that with Big Noon. You did some interesting research, you dug into the numbers, and I thought you found some interesting stuff.
Yeah, I went and looked at the sportsmediawatch.com, has the top 25, the highest rated college football games from last year. 10 of those are postseason games, so I eliminated them. So you've got like the top 15 regular season games. And, I was looking to see which networks, which time frames. 6 of the top 15 were Big Noon kickoff games. And the only other time slot and network with more than one of the top 15, Tom, you could probably guess if I give you one guess as to that time slot in that network.
I'm going to say CBS 3:30 with the combination of the Big Ten and the SEC.
It was CBS at 3:30 with the Iron Bowl and then also Tennessee at Alabama. Alabama is over this place quite a bit. But so 6 of those 15 were Big Noon. 3 of those were Colorado games. And in Colorado, 5 of the 15 were Colorado games. So that, Tom, you can go ahead and explain that situation in terms of the popularity of the Buffaloes there in terms of it's not something that necessarily factors into the time slots that we're talking about.
Yeah, and I think Deion Sanders and the Coach Prime phenomenon last year was something of a little bit of a one-off, and we'll see how much it carries over to year 2 for him in Colorado this year. But I think, it was Split Zone Duo, which is a very good national college football podcast that I enjoy. They were talking about this maybe a couple weeks ago and talked about the fact that the Deion Prime phenomenon is maybe bringing in some different folks to watch college football. You're not necessarily pulling people away from the Alabama game. You might be getting people who are interested in college football because of Deion and not because they're interested in college football. So you're maybe bringing some additional folks into the tent, kind of in the same way that some of the Taylor Swift stuff last year. My daughter was more interested in the NFL last year than she ever has been, and it was because Taylor Swift was there and watching from the luxury suites during some of the Chiefs games and during the Super Bowl. So, in the same way that you kind of brought in some different not normal, big, huge week-to-week college football fans or NFL fans with Taylor Swift, you kind of maybe did some of the same thing with Deion. I'm going to be so interested to see how much that continues because, the first few weeks of last year, it was a legitimate phenomenon. They beat TCU in week 1, and boy, that was, the defending national runner-up, and oh boy, they are rolling, and then they beat Colorado State in that overtime game. I think they started 3-0 last year, and oh boy, Deion's going to do it, and then they finished like 4-8, and they got thumped by Oregon. But that Oregon game was the same week as the Ohio State Notre Dame game, and actually drew a slightly bigger audience than the Ohio State Notre Dame game in prime time on NBC. And Ohio State and Notre Dame are probably two of the 4 biggest fan bases in college football, maybe the 2 biggest. And it was a primetime game, and it went right down to the wire. And, it was a close game, exciting game throughout. So that was pretty much all you could possibly ask out of a game. And that got slightly outdrawn by Oregon basically drawing and quartering Colorado earlier in the day on Fox. So, it's the big noon time slot is a very, very, that was a really risky thing they did, because the general thought in TV is if you want to be in prime time, because that's when everyone's sitting around, no one's got kids sports, no one's out mowing the lawn, you're home, you're sitting on your couch, or you're out at a sports bar with your friends, whatever it is, you're all watching the game. That's generally when you get the most eyeballs. And that's when everyone puts big games, is at night. So Fox did this thing very counterintuitively, put games on at noon. That was typically the, Pam Ward is calling Northwestern and Michigan State, or it's the Jefferson Pilot game between Wake Forest and NC State or something like that. That was like the garbage time slot where terrible games went to die. Fox took that and said, well, no one else is watching anything else. We're going to put a big game here, and then everyone who's watching at noon is going to watch it. And it's worked out really well. So, I guess to answer the question, the answer is not necessarily, because the big noon time slot they really kind of have it to themselves. And until someone else decides to counter program that, I think you've kind of got the biggest audience potential there.
Yeah, I would agree, because you look, and the 6 big noons were top 15. ESPN also had a noon kickoff that was the top 15. That was the Red River rivalry between Texas and Oklahoma. Of those 15 games, only 4 are in the 7 to 7:45 time slot. And there was one 10 p.m., which was Colorado State, Colorado, and then 3:30. So like the noon, because of the competition that you're going against, you're winning out. But the question is this a better deal for NBC? And it's a cheaper deal than the Fox deal. And so maybe, getting Ohio State or the Big Ten in prime time, depending, because when we did our little exercise in the last show about putting together the Big Ten schedule or the Ohio State schedule, it's not always a great week of games for NBC to be choosing from, when especially like early in the season when everybody's playing bad non-conference games. Real quick, back to Colorado. They open on a Thursday night against North Dakota State at home. So people are going to be watching that. North Dakota State's people are going to want to see, like, is this FCS team, a good FCS team, going to come in and beat Colorado? Then week 2, they're at Nebraska. People will be watching that again. Week 3 at Colorado State. That was a 10 p.m. kick last year, and it was one of the top 15 regular season games. So that'll be watched. And then the Baylor, week 4 is Baylor at Colorado. We talked about that possibly being a big noon kickoff. So there's going to be an opportunity for a lot of eyeballs once again on Colorado. But I don't recall people necessarily following along towards the middle and second half of the season. And that was partly because of the losing that took place. But overall, Fox is thrilled with what they've done with the noon thing. And now they've got this, with their partnership with the Big Ten, you got there's no competition from no real competition from NBC, no competition necessarily from CBS at noon. So they've got this thing blocked out pretty well and very effective. And the other networks are like, you're not going to put your big game against that unless it's a bigger game. And you've got a lot of SEC teams that are like, we can't play that early. We prefer to play at night because of the heat early in the season, or the ESPN. I'll be interested to see how ESPN now is the primary partner with the SEC, how they stack their lineup now, because they can just go all day with the SEC. So do they stick to the 3:30 and the 7:30 as opposed to do they try to combat with the noon games?
Yeah, and NBC also can try to stack their Notre Dame games at 2:30 which is their kind of traditional Notre Dame kickoff time, with the 7:30 the 7:30 game. You have a little show in the middle there, and you try and hold people. Yeah, this is going to be different TV deals, different conference lineups. It's going to be not necessarily the same exact setup that you're used to seeing over the last few years. You did mention real quickly North Dakota State and Colorado, and I'm sure everyone went, "Oh, North Dakota State, they never lose. They're going to be incredible. I bet they beat Colorado by 3 touchdowns." I heard you thinking it. Not so fast, my friends. Here is North Dakota State's losses by year: 2011, 1, 2012, 1, 2013, 0, 2014, 1, 2015, 2, 2016, 2, 2017, 1, 2018, 0, 2019, 0. They won the FCS championship in all but one of those years. 2020, they lost 3 games in that weird COVID year. 2021, 1 loss, won the FCS championship. However, 2022, 3 losses, lost in the FCS championship. 2023, 4 losses, lost in the FCS semifinal. They lost 3 conference games last year. They had only lost 4 games in the previous 5 seasons. And so this is not necessarily quite the North Dakota State juggernaut that you are used to. We will see how that translates this year at Colorado. All right, last question. And this was a really good one that we got, but a good conversation about on the huddle board. It was asked by our buddy Out Hiking from the huddle board, presented by Jeff Ruby Steakhouse at BuckeyeHuddle.com. What is the most absurd trend in college football? You and I took this 2 very different directions. Why don't you go first with yours?
Yeah, I went with the double transferring between seasons, where a player goes to a school, the collective doesn't pay them, and so they walk and they go somewhere else. So basically it was like collective's not paying up. Now, I don't know if they're not always paying up when a player leaves twice. So I don't know if this is a 1A and a 1B or a chicken and egg type of thing. I think transferring to a school after the season and then transferring to another school after spring is a bit much. But also, if you bring a player to your school and you don't provide him with the promises, you don't follow through on the promises, I have no problem with them leaving. In fact, I would encourage him to leave. Like, hey, they told you they were going to give you something and they didn't. Why not, go get something somewhere else? Just maybe. I don't know if you can get it up front. That's pay to play. And of course, all of this, none of this exists, Tom. This is not enticement or anything like that. But I think the collective's not paying up is, for one, who would have thought 3 years ago, 4 years ago, we would be talking about something like this. But I would also, you could also throw Colorado in there in terms of the way they are treating and using the transfer portal as if they were, Texas State from 3 years ago or whatever, where you're not even doing the high school stuff anymore. I don't know. For one, I don't know how you build a winner that way. That's more of a, we need to win right now. It's similar but different, I guess, with Bill Snyder back at K-State with the JUCO guys, because for one, you'd get that for multiple years, generally a couple of years, and you'd also have freshmen coming in, and then really you could build your program. This is building a new program every single year with just a couple of pieces of rebar, basically, and then you're building on that. So that was my 2 things. Just the transient nature of Colorado, and then collectives, man, you got to pay the kids.
You do have to pay the kids. You can now do it on top of the table instead of underneath the table. The only thing that's really changed there in a lot of places is that the conversation's being had a little bit more openly. Like, I saw the thing with Brian Kelly earlier in the week, like LSU's not going to be paying for, defensive linemen. That's not how we're going to do business. It's like, oh, wow, this is a real, go ahead and put the under new ownership sign out front on the stadium. Because that I think is probably something that had probably happened once or twice in the past, maybe even before it was legal. For me, the most absurd trend in college football right now, in really all of college sports, is, boy, what are the rules? Well, it sort of depends on what some random state. What did the Virginia state legislature do this week? What did some judge in California decide this week? What are the what is this lawsuit going to get settled as? And that's how everything is getting decided. There's no one in charge right now. The people in charge had an opportunity to solve a lot of these issues a long time ago and decided, like, what if we didn't? And then the answer is, well, you get a bunch of really herky-jerky, the rules keep having to get changed because some judge somewhere said something, or a state legislature passed a rule that said, actually, you can pay the players. The schools can pay the players directly, but they're not employees. And then you have the big House lawsuit, which is getting supposedly settled soon, and what's going to come of that? This is not a way to run a circus, Tony. This is I think you have to have a little bit more structure, a little more organization. I don't know when that's going to happen. It feels like they are sort of getting dragged, kicking and screaming towards the fact that they need to have a solution. That to me is probably the most absurd thing going on with college sports right now. Also, I understand the why behind this. Don't get me wrong. But the fact that the kickoff has gone from one of the most exciting plays in sports to basically a non-entity in college football over the span of the last 10 years. Again, I understand the reason why, and I understand that the NFL is looking at a solution that might make it more interesting coming soon. But that, basically the disappearance of the kickoff as a play of any importance, I don't particularly care for that trend either. Again, I understand why, and I'm hoping they can find a way to do it without the increased injury risk. But overall, don't care for that.
We got to watch Devin Hester and Ted Ginn, do what they do, and it was spectacular. It would be nice to be able to see something like that again. Probably going to have to take the implementation of the NFL's new kickoff rule for it to happen, and it would be a different play, and that's fine. I'm tired of the fair catches. It's enough. Like, just put the ball at the 30 or whatever. If you don't want to, like, you got the option to just send the batter to first base. You don't have to throw the 4 pitches anymore. Just, you know what? We'd rather put the ball on the 30. We don't want to have to kick it. Our kicker's got a bruised foot. Let's just go ahead and set it. Or do you want us to throw it? You do it like the recess. We'll throw it down there, but you have to fair catch it. Yeah. So a lot of great trends. Another trend that is kind of bothering me now is some of the people I follow on Twitter. I get notifications when they tweet because of the whole transfer portal thing. You don't need to retweet the transfer portal softball stuff and, the hockey transfer, all of these. Listen, I'm following you for football transfer portal stuff. I don't need all of the other sports. Is that a me problem? Maybe, but it's absurd and it's a trend. Therefore, they belong. Anyway.
Sounds like you need to spend less time on Twitter. That's my takeaway there.
Don't try to change me. Anyway, I've got to wrap this up because I got some stuff on TikTok I want to watch. So I want to thank you all for tuning in. If you're watching on YouTube, please go ahead and hit the thumbs up. We would appreciate it. And of course, we're running the spring sale at BuckeyeHuddle.com. Become an annual member for the low price of $69.99. That is a deep discount on the normal price. So check that out. A bunch of stuff, as we said, we're on the Southern Swing right now, and a bunch of recruiting stuff going on. And of course, we've got camps coming up in a month as well. So ton of stuff going to be going on there as well. So that will do it for us. Thank you all for tuning in, and we'll talk to you guys later.